Spiritual psychosis. I really don't like this word. I actually hate this word because on one level, all psychosis is spiritual, right? Because you don't need to be into New Age spirituality whatsoever to see a crazy person, to see a person in a mental health crisis on the street, saying that they're Jesus or something like that, right? So, I mean, we all remember if you're on TikTok, I don't know. Well, maybe we don't all remember. If I wasn't banned from TikTok, they would remember. But Gabby Hanna was like a big YouTuber, I believe. I didn't really know who she was until last year. She had a manic episode for days on TikTok. And during that, she was saying she was the second coming of Christ. And then I was looking at the comments and a lot of people were saying stuff like, the same thing happened to me when I went into psychosis, or when I went into spiritual psychosis, or when I had a manic episode, or when I this, or when I that, all these different types of mental health crisis. All of these people were saying that they had the same exact thought, that they were the second coming of Christ. And then, I'm not saying everybody that has that feeling is in psychosis, right? I'm just using this as an example. But, so basically, when that was happening, I was reading the comments and it was so interesting that people were like, well, you just have that because that's your idea of God. And some people responding, they're like, I'm Jewish. I don't know why I thought I was the second coming of Christ. I don't even believe he's the Messiah or he's the second coming. And so it's interesting is that's like what I said before, is this is kind of in our blueprint, in our archetype of human reality. So that's why I don't really like the term spiritual psychosis, because they make it seem like it only happens to people who are into spirituality. But these kind of concepts happen in all different types of mental health crises, even if the person is not Christian, is not religious, doesn't have that. What they really are is a spiritual emergency or a spiritual crisis. And now we could talk a little bit about, so this is sometimes can happen to people if they have like a transcendental experience. This could be through a lot of different things that could cause it, but it basically then causes distress and some psychotic symptoms in their life, and also could impact their day-to-day life. So one of the main things that, again, this is a fine line, and this is why everything's an individual experience, because sometimes we might look at someone and think that that's what they're going through. But then we also have to check ourselves and say, do I really know what this person is going through? And this is why you don't want to be diagnosing people on social media. That was like kind of a big trend last year on TikTok, where everyone was accusing everyone else of spiritual psychosis. And you really can't diagnose people through a computer screen or a phone screen. So the blurring of reality. Blurring of reality is very difficult when you're living that twofold life. But sometimes that spectrum can go too far, and sometimes the reality is way too blurred. Sometimes people actually have their veil blown way too open also. So there is that thing where sometimes people might be in a psychotic state, or sometimes they might actually be experiencing something. So it is a very fine line. Things that can cause it are vivid spiritual experiences. So this could be through meditation. It could be a positive or a negative spiritual experience. Sometimes people might have it through a vision of an angel or something, or someone could have it through a vision of a devil, just as an example. And sometimes encounters with spiritual beings. We all are starting to have more encounters with spiritual beings, but this is why we always got to come back to that self-reflection and come back to that grounding of ourselves, because as more spiritual stuff happens, as more people are having encounters with beings, we need to make sure that we self-reflect and ground back into our 3D reality, because we're still meant to be here as humans, no matter what spiritual experiences we have. Sometimes this could be from heightened awareness. Sometimes it could be from something that triggered it. Like it could be a lot of times in my experience, what I've seen people who've experienced psychosis has something to do with some type of drug, or not just street drugs, prescription drugs, or even sometimes plant medicine. It could be whatever. I personally feel the Adderall use is crazy. This is my own belief. The rest of this here is research that I've been talking about. A lot of people that I know that have experienced the spiritual psychosis have been dabbling in the too much Adderall. Okay. And even though it's prescribed to them, you're dabbling in that at the same time. This is where I've seen people get a little too blurred. So if you are taking mind-altering medication or mind-altering drugs or even plant medicine, these are even all more reasons to make sure that you self-reflect and get grounded more than ever, because Adderall is the number one thing that I see people having psychosis over. So yeah, any type of psychoactive experience, substance, also major life changes or intense spiritual experiences. Major life changes are very underestimated to cause someone to have a breaking point. Like I said before, losing someone could cause a spiritual awakening. Losing someone can also cause psychological distress. A traumatic event can cause severe PTSD and can cause someone to blur reality and to not be able to know where they're at, you know, what's really happening, what's real, what's fake. Sometimes it's a coping mechanism. So these are all things too. Now, once someone is really in the thick of that, it's hard for them to ground themselves. And this is why I'm sharing this information, because it's so important that you ground yourself throughout. You don't want to wait until things get crazy. You need to ground yourself regularly. You need to reflect regularly. You need to do your regular 3D stuff. Don't get so isolated from your 3D life that you're so in your metaphysical life, in your 5D or your 4D life. I'm sorry, I just thought of this joke. I know this is a serious topic, but a lot of people trying to get to the 4D right now. A lot of people doing stuff, teaching classes, all this stuff about getting to the 4D. It's a fourth deception, okay? It's not the fourth dimension. A lot of fourth deception going on. Just saying. Just saying, okay? A lot of people trying to get to the fourth dimension. Fourth deception. Okay, moving on. Sometimes there's also these things, if they start to impact your daily functioning, that's something that you want to start to check before things start to slip more. If you're finding it, and of course, we're all lazy, we're all overwhelmed. A lot of people have ADHD and different things going on. So sometimes, you know, you might slip on your hygiene. You might slip on taking care of yourself or your life or this or that. But when you find yourself doing those things, you don't want to, in my opinion, make excuses or lean into them. You know, you don't want to lean in too much to that and be like, oh, because of my ADHD, I can't clean my house. Oh, because of my ADHD, I haven't slept in days. I haven't eaten in days. I can't get food. I can't wash. I can't things. It becomes like a meme now. And I see a lot of people like sharing stuff like this. But this is how you start to slip further and further away from yourself. So when you find yourself doing those things, one, you don't want to judge yourself, but at the same time, just take that little step. Do some affirmations. Force yourself to take a walk. Force yourself to do that little bit of breath work. Force yourself. And this is where, see, we talked about the spiritual bypassing, where you don't want to be getting into delusions from affirmations. But sometimes that's why it's such a fine line, because if you've really slipped into anxiety and depression, sometimes those affirmations are what you need. That's where I say sometimes Delulu is the Salulu, because sometimes that is the little thing that you're doing to help yourself. And that's why everything is such a personal experience. So I can only give you this information, and then you guys can use it in the ways that feels right for you, you know, because there is no one size fits all for anything. And also I forgot to say that in the spiritual bypassing and the spiritual ego part, the one size fits all is not a thing. So what you do for your health is not for everybody else. So, you know, in one of my previous videos, and, you know, absolutely no hate to this person at all. In fact, love to this person. But someone was upset that I said in one of my videos that some people need to eat meat. You know, there's not a one size fits all diet for people. And someone was like, I'm so disappointed in you for saying that some people eat meat with this. Listen, I don't eat meat. But also, it is a spiritual ego for me to think that my beliefs should apply to everybody. You know, I don't like factory farming. I don't like to eat meat. I used to love it. And after I watched that damn movie, Food Inc., 10 years ago, I was never able to eat it again. But I can't say that what I believe is what everyone should do. If I'm like, every single person needs to do breath work. If you're not doing breath work, you're not doing nothing. We gotta reflect. If we feel like everybody should be doing what we're doing, that our way is the right way, this is what's so important. And see, like you say, you take no pharma drugs. See, I don't take any pharmaceutical drugs. And sometimes I can get a little self-righteous. Not that I'm better for not taking them, but that sometimes I get worried about other people taking them. I'm like, I don't trust it. Be careful, you know? And I need to check myself sometimes, is that sometimes people need those things. Sometimes people need an SSRI for where they're at right now. Some people need Adderall for where they're at right now. You always want to be careful with the dependency in a profit-based system. But at the same time, you know, we have to be mindful that what works for some people is different than what works for us. And it's not one size fits all. Everyone has their own spiritual path, their own spiritual journey. None of us look the same on our spiritual path. None of us have the same soul. We all come back to one source, but we're all individual fractals for a reason, for different experiences, for different learning. So we need to check ourselves. You know, I get that way, especially about the big pharma. More than anything, I get that way about the big pharma. So I understand the person in here who's like, I don't do the big pharma. I'm like, that's one that I got to check myself on, is because I get angry about it. I'm like, they're giving kids freaking Adderall, getting them addicted, you know, like, but I gotta, and of course I can have my beliefs. But also then we have to make sure that we can also understand that some people's journey is in a different place and that everybody is in their own space and in their own time. Okay. So we want to also not be afraid to ask for help if you guys do need help. If you guys do need to go a traditional route, if you do need to see a professional, in the sense of like a medical professional, don't strip yourself of that experience or that help because of a spiritual ego, because of spiritual bypassing, because of spiritual beliefs. You know, if you feel you do need that medical help, that is the more 3D medical help, then yeah, love and light and meditation and breath work is not the only thing that's going to get everyone there. So we need to respect other people's journeys, other people's beliefs. And this is what it keeps coming back to. All of this comes back to respecting other people's journeys. When we look at